Can you feel the energy here? Hi, everyone. I am so excited to welcome you to the first episode of my new show, the Numeracy Report. Thank you for being here. Before we begin, I want to take a quick moment to introduce you to the show, myself, and of course, our guest, Dr. Shanon Peter. My goal with this show is to showcase the diverse ways that math impacts our world and to inspire listeners to consider the endless possibilities that a strong foundation in math can offer. My name is Sandra Tambidurai, or Mrs. T by my students. I am passionate about teaching children math and statistics. I'm a teacher, a tutor, a mother of two, and a lifelong learner. Let me first tell you a little bit about Dr. Shanon Peter. Shanon Peter is a doctor in Los Angeles, California. Born in northern New Jersey to parents from Kerala, India, he went to public school for K through 12 and is grateful to many of his teachers along the way for instilling in him a deep love of mathematics and its applications throughout the sciences and social sciences. He graduated cum laude in molecular and cellular biology and a minor in Spanish from Harvard College in 2005. He then spent a year as a research fellow at the Harvard Initiative for Global Health, including some work for the Gates Millennium Foundation doing statistical analysis on the direct impact on health outcomes during rollout of Mexico's Seguro Popular or nationalized health insurance for all. Shanon then entered medical school at Rutgers back in his home state of New Jersey, where he met his future wife, Tiffany, and developed further appreciation for the role of biostatistics in interpreting the medical literature and helping individual patients make the best choices for their health. He then moved west to complete residency training in internal medicine at Stanford University Hospital in Palo Alto, California, before joining Tiffany in Southern California. His first job out of training was as an assistant professor at UCLA David Geffen School of Medicine and Hospitalist. He oversaw a journal club in which residents would use their math and statistics knowledge to analyze recent medical journal articles. He later transitioned to the new Kaiser Permanente School of Medicine, mentoring medical students and working at Kaiser's Panorama City Hospital in Los Angeles. A fellow fan of lifelong learning, he earned his MBA via distance learning in 2022 and plans to earn an MPH within the next 2 years to further complement his patient care and teaching. Shanon and his wife have two wonderful kids, ages 7 and 8, with whom they enjoy skiing, tennis, soccer, hiking, surfing, acting, math competitions, and everything else Southern California has to offer. So, enough with the formalities. Let's get on with the show. So, Shanon, as you
Sandra.
know, the whole idea of this interview came about from our conversation like a few years ago when you shared with me that Spanish and statistics were two of the most important courses from your high school that like helps you in your role as a doctor, right? And I had shared that with my AP statistics students at the time, and I really like felt the impact it had on their learning. And as I continued my passion for education as a virtual tutor, teaching hundreds of students all over the US, I definitely found a disconnect between, what kids learn and why they learn it. And I believe that if we can close that gap, that really will contribute a lot to math education in the US. So this is definitely one of the missions that I have for this podcast. And we've kind of talked about a little bit earlier where, I had discussed with you how I feel that full-time teachers really like, especially if you're good teachers and excellent teachers, like have no time because there is a lot of responsibilities for them, and endless grading. And so my mission for this podcast is really to provide value to teachers and to, parents and students, because we all want the same goal. We want to develop the leaders of tomorrow, right? So that's what everybody, all of us want. So I am really grateful for you for like getting me thinking. I'm not joking. I'm really grateful for you getting me thinking and inspiring me. And so I'm so excited to have you here to share your insights, with current math teachers, students, and parents. So to start though, can you tell me a little bit about your job?
Yeah, sure, Sandra. In my job, I'm what one would call a hospitalist. That's
Mhm.
essentially a newer field within medicine. It's a subdivision of internal medicine. So I treat adults who are ill enough to be admitted from the emergency room into the hospital or the intensive care unit.
Mhm.
And I treat them for any of the problems that they might have, many of which involve basic physiology, how the body works under stress, um, until they're well enough to be discharged home from the hospital and follow up with their usual internal medicine doctor. So I'm kind of a niche within internal medicine. Some of the problems that I treat in my patients on a regular basis include things like a heart attack, where there's a limited amount of blood flow to the vessels of the heart, causing pain, suffering, shortness of breath, and possibly death if there's an arrhythmia that develops.
Right.
Diseases like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or COPD, in which there are some quite mathematical airflow patterns that emerge that are pathologic, where we need to overcome those with medications, with support, sometimes on the ventilator. In this past 2.5 years, I've treated a few thousand patients with COVID that's been severe enough to be hospitalized and sometimes on the ventilator for it. And so all of these things kind of require acute knowledge of physiology and how it works. Other conditions include many different types of infections, many different types of strokes. Sometimes we'll have patients who have major social issues that are, requiring hospitalization because there's not an otherwise safe place to care for them until we can help them figure that out.
Mhm.
But most of it, it's basically, patients who are really ill and need acute care.
Okay, wow. So very you know, huge contributions to humanity you're making. So I mean, what got you interested in this career?
So I think a couple of things. When I was young, I had the benefit. I'm very grateful. I think, as you mentioned in my biography, I'm very grateful for the input of many different teachers that I had along the way, from elementary to middle to secondary school, who really instilled in me an appreciation for kind of the value of thinking numerically,
Hmm.
the value of thinking objectively. I just developed an appreciation for science really early. And I think all sciences stem from math. I mean, I think that goes without saying for me. So I kind of saw that these were ways in which you could do all kinds of creative things, and some of them to the end of helping other people. So, through a lot of my, high school experiences, including some volunteer experiences at the local hospital where my mom was a respiratory therapist,
Right. Yeah.
um, similar to a nurse that helps out with acute breathing problems. Um, you know, I ended up kind of realizing, wow, this is something that, I think I could do something in this field really quite well,
Yeah.
and, be satisfied every day, and come home knowing that I made a difference while using my brain in the process. So it was like the best of both worlds. And then by the time I got to college, I developed a couple of close mentorship relationships, which really cemented my desire to be a physician. I
Hmm.
did a outstanding program in Guatemala, where I was exposed to, really chronically malnourished and ill children, and kind of how to treat and optimize care in that kind of resource poor setting. I did that fellowship where I just graduated from college, and I
This
worked on
wasn't Harvard. This wasn't Harvard.
this was after finishing. I graduated Harvard in 2005, but I was very close with a professor who taught a course called Grand Challenges in Global Health.
Mm.
And it's kind of a multidisciplinary course, which brings in a lot from the medicine side, but also the social, the humanities, and really the numerical and statistical kind of. It's really hard for even an organization like the World Health Organization, or individual country governments to kind of know whether like population-wide health interventions are working, without actually analyzing the data received back from the carrying out of those interventions. And
Right.
so we kind of function as a think tank that would look at a lot of these different interventions. The one that I worked on a lot was the nationalized health plan in Mexico that was rolling out state by state.
Mhm.
And I would use my high school and college statistics background combined with some on the job training, using a really interesting and user friendly data analysis program called Stata. So I would take a look at the states that had already implemented this program and what kind of health differences it was making in terms of mortality, but also morbidity, which is the burden of disease on people that are living.
Mhm.
Mortality being, if people pass away from diseases. And I would compare the states that had already rolled out the nationalized health plan, which offers health insurance for poor Mexican citizens, to the states that hadn't done it yet. And we actually found that this insurance offering was making a really big difference. It's kind of a tragedy to me that here north of the border, we haven't yet accomplished any kind of healthcare for all.
Right.
Um, but at least in that particular program and a lot of other programs throughout Europe and other parts of the world, there's at least a basic level of healthcare provided. And we were
Mhm.
able to show using math and statistics that this was an effective intervention. This was an effective use of dollars or pesos, if you will. This was an effective intervention. Getting people insured was actually one of the best things you could do for their health and for their well-being. So I really learned a lot from that experience at med school. It was a kind of an awakening to the importance of biostatistics, which is kind of applied statistics for the field of epidemiology,
Mhm.
and kind of learned that okay, it's important to kind of understand the difference between t-test in its situation, or ANOVA, or chi-square, Fisher exact test. It's important to kind of know what type of statistical test is relevant to apply to what situation, because that's how you actually figure out truth from the data.
Right, right, right. So that is amazing. So I did not know that you used so much statistics, during like before you actually started your a job as a physician, right? Like that. Uh-huh. So
Yeah, even prior to doing any medical training at all, I kind of saw the deep impact that statistics have in formulating policy,
mm,
or at least they should have. We should base these big decisions on statistics and a firm understanding, of the different shades of probability. Because again, I mentioned truth. A statistician will tell you there's no such thing as absolute truth,
yeah,
but there are p-values.
right, right.
Um,
That's probability. Mhm.
and so if you're able to use the data to make meaningful inference,
Mhm.
then you can actually inform policy and inform where the spending goes in really intelligent ways, rather than, sometimes when I look at the news, it seems like it's all emotions based, it's all seat of the pants based. Instead, using data to drive decisions to me is the best way to go about it on a population level, and also on an individual patient level.
Right. So did you know, like when you learned statistics as in high school, and what kind of course did you take? Did you take the AP Stats course, or was it a course in high school that was just offered at your high school?
So interestingly enough, and I think this actually, hopefully, this will appeal to some of the kids out there who maybe don't have a deep interest in going into science, but are interested in humanities, liberal arts, social
Mhm.
sciences. The teacher at my high school who taught statistics, and it was not an AP course. My school didn't offer
Offer
AP
it
at
then.
that time. But she was the same teacher who taught AP Psychology, which was one of the most popular courses for many years, Miss
Hmm.
Knoll. She's a
Hmm.
teacher that I'm in touch with to today. We actually message
Yeah.
frequently. She retired out to the West Coast, so I see her every once in a while.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, she's actually just a fantastic person first
Yeah.
and teacher. And so I say that because, so she trained as a social scientist.
Hmm.
And she really did a fantastic job with the psychology AP, kind of introducing us to the human mind and
Hmm.
decision making and the factors that go into that, the biases that go into that. I
Yeah.
actually followed it up with many more courses once I was at Harvard in psychology. I got really interested in the subject, but she complemented it with statistics.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
statistics is kind of the way to study any social topic, whether it be something like, decision making that goes into voting in elections, or whether it be, things in sociology. I took a great sociology course where we used tons of statistics to determine were programs like temporary aid for needy families, TANF,
Hmm.
actually working? Was grant aid towards women more effective than that towards whole families? Like questions like that, it takes some understanding of statistics and understanding of which test to use and all the rest of it in order to actually make a meaningful conclusion.
Right. Yes, how to design a study, right? Like how to design a study so you can actually get valid conclusions out of that, instead of, biased conclusions. So um,
Right.
I think that, like, anybody can benefit from, and
Totally.
it's amazing. So but in particular, so you mentioned you learned statistics in high school, but then you followed it with some courses in college. So what kind of courses did you take in college that you feel like helps you right now in your function as a doctor?
Yeah, so in college, I think, and this is a little pivot away from statistics into
Mm-hmm.
more basic math, because I think all types of math are applicable in my field, medicine, as much so as the social sciences, as much so as many other fields, applied sciences, etc. So the courses that I felt like were very helpful from late high school and college, in terms of applying towards medicine. Honestly, I have to say, I also felt that calculus
Hmm.
was actually a really relevant study
Really?
to what I do now. And I know it's hard when your calculus is a complex topic. It requires a lot of building blocks before getting there. You have to have a really solid understanding of trigonometry. You have to have a really solid geometry foundation in order to be a good
Hmm.
student of calculus. But one of the things that I think is really interesting in understanding, because as an internist, right, I don't operate.
Hmm.
Most of what I do is prescribe medications for the right situation.
Right.
Um, and some of that includes drips, like IV medications that are ongoing for a
Yeah.
patient. Let's say they have arrhythmia and their heart's beating 190 beats per minute. They're going to pass out soon.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
I might need to start them on a medication that's going in real time. Understanding these two topics called pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, which is basically how does the drug distribute itself in the human body over time? How does it penetrate into the relevant tissues? Like, for example, in the one I just mentioned, to the heart.
Hmm.
How does it keep from accumulating too much toxicity? My wife is a hematologist oncologist. And so that's a huge deal. Pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, which are basically studies of what is the integral, what does the area under the curve of this drug's action look like?
Yeah.
Those are super important in her field because it's kind of you're dancing a delicate line. I care for a lot of these patients when they're admitted to the hospital. She cares for them in the clinic. They're patients that come in with leukemia. They're extremely sick. They'll die in 2 days if you don't treat them right away. And what you got to do is you got to get them enough chemotherapy into the relevant organs or tissue. Let's see, leukemia means the bone marrow is what's kind of causing the pathology. You
Hmm.
got to get the chemotherapy to the bone marrow, but at the same time, you don't want to affect the rest of the systems, or you will affect them, but you want to minimize the negative effects on the rest of the systems. So understanding the integral of the drug and how it works is actually pretty important to understanding how your chemo is going to work, both on the
Oh.
systems that need the cancer cells killed and on the healthy organs.
See, that I did not know. So that's, I mean, that is really powerful because I mean, I don't know if students, especially who are interested in medicine, really understand. Did you know that when you were,
No,
yeah, 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 yeah,
no, I
yeah.
had no idea how much math I'd be using.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And that is the whole point of this, I to just connect careers and why we're learning what we're learning. So and do you think your like knowledge of statistics helps you be distinguished from other healthcare professionals? Do you think that is the case? Statistics or math, other math like
Yeah,
calculus?
I would say like among practicing physicians, I think that there are definitely some of us who stay really connected
Mm,
to the data and, stay really up to date and, think for ourselves when interpreting the medical data.
mm,
I think that, like any job out there,
yeah,
if you aren't trying to be excellent, if you aren't trying to be like a thought leader and an educator and just really excel at your job, you probably could get by in a field like mine, internal medicine, which is a general field, without necessarily stretching your math muscles every day or
yeah,
all the time. But I do feel that the students know the difference, and it's actually a really powerful thing to kind of keep in touch with my math training, via precepting things like Journal Club, because
mm,
believe it or not, everyone's heard of fake news, right?
right,
Um, there's a lot of fake medical news out there. There's a lot of, I'm not just talking about kind of things that are published in the lay media. I'm
mhm,
actually talking about in actual journals. Even top journals sometimes suffer from this effect that, for any of you guys who are studying or soon to study statistics, would know as something called p hacking,
mhm,
right? Going
mhm,
through so many variables that you're just kind of mining any one of them that becomes positive, any one of them that shows a signal, a
yeah,
p-value of
yeah,
less
yeah,
than
yeah,
0.05, for the purpose of kind of coming up with some kind of publishable result
mhm,
that will get you some publicity and maybe some grant funding or whatnot. And a lot of this happens post hoc, after the fact, and it's not the right way to frame a question. And so when you read an article and you realize that, oh, these these authors are trying to make this very narrow conclusion, which seems like it just happened by chance, and they went about it in this roundabout way. They're trying to make the statistics look like they planned it from the beginning, but
right.
in reality, I don't really think I should make any clinical decisions. I shouldn't make a decision for my patient based on this conclusion, because the start point was not a valid way to do it. I think
Right.
those things can be really helpful.
Right. So I understand that like for any job, yeah, to kind of like to if you want to be excellent, then yeah, what do you need to do for that? And then the statistics definitely helps you in your case. And for Tiffany, it seems like calculus helps her quite a lot.
Sure.
Um, so I love this conversation, Shannon. Like I am really happy to have you on here. Did you wish you knew more of any kind of math, like, in high school that helps you right now in your career?
Yeah, I think a part of me always wished I went a little bit further in mathematics, because I think one of the things about a field like medicine is that it's so both broad and deep, that once you kind of commit to it, to some degree, your advancement of learning on other topics is going to necessarily taper off. And
Right.
I never studied, for example, like I always thought, I always thought some of the applications of math within the realm of engineering were very interesting. And some of those, let's say, if I had an engineering background, which is basically applied math, if
Mhm.
I had an engineering background, which I don't, I might kind of be somebody that could also complement my medical career with designing devices for use in the human body, to help with different conditions. That's something that I think would have been cool in an alternate life. I would love to have done
Right.
that, but
Right.
there's
Right.
just
Right.
so much time,
I know. I know.
I think linear algebra is a topic that I never studied.
Uh-huh.
I never got that much into because it wasn't a prerequisite for medical school.
Right.
But at the same time, when I see what some of my colleagues have done with it,
Hmm.
I have some colleagues from college who have, gone on to work at the Jet Propulsion Lab at NASA here in Southern California. I've had some colleagues that have done, applied or theoretical physics, and kind of learning those topics in depth allow you to do these other, in my mind, really cool, really interesting projects that have a lot of other societal benefits. So yeah, there's a little part of me that wishes I had just more time to learn more.
I know. And I mean, that's who you are, though. Like you love to
Yeah,
learn, and that's amazing. And that's what we want to kind of impart on to our students, right? To have a lifelong learning, lifelong love for learning.
right.
Because if you have that, then you can do whatever you want to do in your life. So so um, like at this point I want to ask you, do you have any advice you would offer to a current math student who is interested in your profession?
Yeah, I would advise, even at the high school, even at the middle school level, you know, I would advise students to dig deep. There are two different types of learning. There's broad learning, which is a lot of what you do during your, middle, secondary, even college education,
Mhm.
kind of learning the lay of the land for a subject like algebra or geometry or calculus. And then there's deep learning. And I think the difference between the two is that when you're doing deep learning, you're really applying one specific niche of the field, of the topic of interest, in a way that can develop into like a really meaningful project, can develop into research essentially, is contributing new frontiers to human knowledge. And that's possible. It's possible to do research even as a high schooler, definitely as a college student. It's possible to do research that actually uncovers yet unknown facts to mankind. I think that's one of the coolest things that a human being can self-actualize into. I personally haven't, I've done different types of research during my career. I don't think I've personally, done any groundbreaking research, but when you get bitten by the bug, if you will, if you get into a topic deeply, so you're studying, say statistics, but instead of just like learning all statistics and getting an A+ on the final exam,
Mhm.
you apply it by contacting your local community college or university professor, in that topic and saying, hey, is there a project that we could work on that has to do with this topic or that topic or the other one? Is there a project, if you're interested in politics, is there a project that has to do with how the electoral college is built and whether we could figure out gerrymandering if it's happened here or not? Is there a project, let's say you're interested in the social sciences, in which we could figure out um, how do we mitigate biases against people of a certain race or ethnic group? If you're
Right.
interested in the hard sciences and you want to get into a chemistry lab and say, how are we going to synthesize a new polymer that's going to be helpful for this type of human application? Maybe it's a material that's needed for keeping someone warm, or maybe it's application that's going to be more relevant in the lab. But whatever
Right.
it is, deep learning, I would encourage everyone to think about, getting a mentor and using their math and using their skills in a deep way.
So that's really interesting because if we can, because usually typically students, at least right now, typically students take statistics when they're like in 11th grade or
Sure.
12th, right? If you can introduce those topics earlier on, then kids can have that in their back of their minds and know what they can do with this knowledge. You know what I'm saying? So and moving maybe from having a course and AP statistics, for example, unfortunately, of course, it's an AP course, so you have to teach to a test, right?
Of
But
course.
but maybe if you can have another course where you are as a teacher, as an educator, if you can facilitate students in getting these kind of projects going on, then that'll also give the kids confidence in doing that on their own, so yeah, like a lot of interesting ideas, Shannon. So anyway, before we leave, did you I wanted to ask you, did you want to say anything to any teacher that you've had who's made an impact on your life?
Sure. Yeah. I think, one of the teachers that's made the biggest impact for me was Mr. Rusinello. Uh, may he rest in peace. He
Yeah.
taught my junior year of high school pre-calculus
Hmm.
and my senior year of high school calculus AP. But he was someone that really valued the process, and it wasn't about rote memorization. Some of what I learned from his way of teaching was that when you understand, you
Hmm.
don't have to memorize much at all.
Yeah.
I'm not a person that's great at memorization. I don't have a photographic memory.
Me neither.
Parts of med school were really difficult because medical school is, I just talked about broad versus deep learning. Just the basics to be a doctor is kind of one of the broadest learning kind of safaris that one could ever go on. You have to learn so much about so many different things,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily very deep in many of these fields. You have to be exposed to all of it, though. And so that's kind of difficult for me. One thing that makes it easier is when I really understand a topic. From Mr. Rusinello, I kind of learned that, all like when I treat patients for cardiac conditions, when their blood pressure is super low or super high for a variety of reasons, right? And I'm using medications that are going to act in real time on the human body to correct some of these issues, and therefore, help them overcome the bleeding in the brain that they're having or the heart attack that's ongoing. Um, you know, it all boils down to just one equation: V equals IR.
Mm-hmm.
That's the basic equation of voltage from physics, and that's also the equation that governs blood flow in the human body. V being the difference between blood pressures on the systolic side and the other side, I being the flow, and R being the peripheral vascular resistance, the resistance that the arteries provide. And from the early training that I had with Mr. Rusinello, I learned that I could develop that into any of 12 different equations or so that show me how and where the drugs work. And I don't have to memorize it. I can derive it. And
Right.
that's kind of a powerful thing if you think about it. Stretching your brain to the point of being able to derive what you need to do the thing that you're trying to do, whether it be
Mm-hmm.
for your job or for your research or whatnot. I mean, that's just a really powerful concept. So and he was just a good teacher of life lessons as well. He really encouraged us to stay fit. He
Hmm.
himself, even in his 70s, I think he was almost 80 when I had him as a teacher, and he was in much
Wow.
better shape than any of us in the class. He was at the gym every day,
Wow.
and so he'd always, yeah. So anyway, mighty rest in peace. He
Me
passed
too.
of old age in the last 3 or 4 years.
Hmm.
But Mr. Rusinello, yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like that's very important. We have to go away from rote memorizations to actually applying, because especially like, even to this day, sometimes I feel like teachers, ask kids to learn certain formulas, but then what's the point of that if you can look them all up? You want to know how you can apply it, and you want to teach kids how to like derive those things by yourself, like so.
Right.
So moving away from rote memorization, is powerful. So it's great that you had him
Yeah.
at that stage in your life to kind of impart that teaching onto you. um Anyway, that's all the time we have for this episode of the Numeracy Report. We hope you enjoyed learning about the ways math is used in medicine and the unique challenges and opportunities it presents. Thank you so much, Dr. Shanon Peter, for giving us your time. We really enjoyed talking to you, and it's really helped me understand quite a lot about medicine, and I'm sure it will help a lot of our viewers get a glimpse of medicine, and how how math is applied, and math and statistics is applied in medicine as well. So thank you so much once again. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me. So until we see you next, adios.
Adios, Dr. T. It was nice talking with you. I
Yeah.
appreciate the invitation. Thank you.